My name is Anna Beckett. I'm 35 years old. My daughter is named Rosie. She is 8, going on 9 in April, and she is the kind of person who makes you feel like the most important person in the room when she talks to you. Not because she is performing warmth, but because she actually, genuinely, wants to know things about you. She asks follow-up questions. She remembers details. She will ask a classmate how their sick hamster is doing 3 weeks after the hamster came up once in passing, because she was listening and because it mattered to her that it mattered to them. She has had the same best friend since kindergarten. Her name is Zoe. They met on the first day of school. Rosie had gotten to class early and was already sitting down when Zoe arrived and couldn't find a seat, and Rosie immediately moved her backpack and said, "You can sit here." That was it. That was the whole story of how they became best friends. A backpack moved, a seat offered. For 3 years they were inseparable, in the complete, unself-conscious way that children are inseparable before they learn to manage how much they need people. They had sleepovers every other weekend. They made up languages that consisted mostly of nonsense words and absolutely cracked themselves up using them at the dinner table. They had a joint collection of friendship bracelets they'd been making since first grade, a whole tangled pile of them, rubber and string and the plastic kind with the little beads, and they each wore the ones the other had made, always, on the same wrist. Rosie wore her Zoe bracelets to school every single day. In October, something changed. It started small enough that I almost missed it. Rosie came home from school quiet on a Monday. Not sad, just quiet. But the particular quality of her quiet was different from her usual after-school decompression. I asked how her day was. "Fine," she said. I asked about Zoe. "Fine," she said, and then changed the subject so smoothly I didn't catch it until later. Tuesday was the same. Wednesday, she came home and went straight to her room, and I heard her moving things around on her shelf, the shelf where she keeps her friendship bracelet pile, and I thought, something is wrong. I knocked. She let me in. She was sitting on her bed with the bracelets in her lap. "Did something happen with Zoe?" I said. She looked at the bracelets for a long moment. "She didn't save me a seat today," she said. "At lunch? She used to always save me a seat. She was already sitting with Peyton and Madison, and she didn't save me a seat. And when I walked over, she kind of..." Rosie stopped. "She kind of looked away." I sat down next to her on the bed. "Did you ask her about it?" "I texted her after school." "What did she say?" Rosie handed me her tablet. The text chain was short. Rosie had sent, "Hey, are you okay? You seemed weird today. Is everything okay with us?" Zoe had sent back a single word, "Fine," nothing else. I handed the tablet back. I held what I was feeling very carefully and did not let it show on my face. "Sometimes people have bad days," I said. "Let's give it a few days." I gave it 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, I watched my daughter try to understand something that had no logic she could find. Zoe did not save her a seat at lunch. Zoe did not answer her messages, or answered with one-word replies that closed down conversation rather than opening it. Zoe did not look at her in the hallway. Not in a mean way. Not in the way of a fight. Just in the way of a person who had been told to look somewhere else. Rosie did not cry at school. I know this because she told me, and because Rosie is honest in the particular way of children who have never been given a reason to be otherwise. She cried at home. Quietly, in her room, at night, the kind of crying that tries not to be heard. I heard it. I lay in my own bed and listened to the sound of my 8-year-old trying to understand why her best friend had disappeared without an explanation, and I thought, I am going to find out what happened. I found out by accident, which is how you find out most things that people have decided you shouldn't know. I was at the school pickup line on a Thursday afternoon. I was parked 2 cars behind Zoe's mother, whose name is Kristen. I didn't know Kristen well. We were school friendly, the way you are with parents you see at drop off and pick up and school events, pleasant and surface and nothing underneath. She drove a white SUV. She always arrived exactly 4 minutes before the bell, which I knew because I had noticed it in the way you notice things about people who are connected to your child's life. I was not looking at her intentionally, but her window was open, and she was on the phone, and I was 2 cars back in a quiet parking lot, and I could hear her clearly. I will not repeat every word of what I heard. I'll give you the shape of it. She was talking to someone, another parent, from context, about Rosie, about how she had talked to Zoe, about how she had told Zoe that some friendships are fine for a while, but you outgrow them, about how Rosie was sweet, but she was not. She used a phrase here that I have thought about every day since. The kind of friend who helps Zoe grow. She said, Zoe has real potential. I don't want her spending all her time with a child who doesn't push herself. She said, I've already talked to her teachers about grouping them separately for projects. She said, Zoe understands. Kids are resilient. They move on. The bell rang. Children began coming out of the building. I sat in my car. I watched Kristen get out of her SUV and smile at Zoe and take her backpack and carry it to the car the way you do when you love your child and believe completely that what you are doing is in her best interest. I watched Rosie come out of the building alone, scan the pickup area for my car, find it, and walk over. She was wearing the friendship bracelets on her left wrist. All of them. She got in the car. How was your day? Okay, she said. She looked out the window. She did not cry. She was learning not to cry about this, and that learning was the thing that hurt me most of all. Not the friendship ending, but my daughter teaching herself to want less, to expect less, to carry something painful and call it fine. I drove home, I made dinner, I helped with homework, I put Rosie to bed. Then I went and sat at the kitchen table and thought very carefully about what I was going to do. Hit that like button and subscribe before I tell you what I did next. I made one phone call. I called Kristen the next morning after drop-off from my kitchen. She answered on the third ring. Warm, surprised, friendly. The voice of someone who was not expecting a call and had no idea the one was coming. I said, Kristen, I want to talk about something, and I'd like to do it directly, so I'm going to be direct. I want to ask you specifically about a conversation you had with Zoe about her friendship with Rosie. Silence. Then, I'm not sure what you mean. I said, I heard you on the phone in the school parking lot on Thursday. I wasn't trying to. I was 2 cars back, and your window was open. I heard what you told someone about Rosie, that you'd talked to Zoe about moving on from the friendship, that you'd already spoken to teachers about grouping them separately. A longer silence. Then, I was just trying to do what's best for Zoe. I said, I understand that's what you believe. I want to tell you what you actually did. She said nothing. I said, you looked at my 8-year-old daughter and decided she wasn't good enough to be friends with your daughter. You told your child that her closest friend, the girl who gave her a seat on the first day of kindergarten, the girl she spent 3 years building something real with, was holding her back. You made that decision privately, without talking to me, without any conversation, and then you coached your daughter to end the friendship without explanation. And for 2 weeks, my daughter has cried herself to sleep, not knowing what she did wrong. Because from where she's standing, she just lost her best friend and has no idea why. The silence on the other end was different now. I said, Rosie is not holding Zoe back. Rosie is kind and curious, and she reads at 2 grade levels above her year, and she spends her free time learning things, because she loves learning things, and nobody made her do it. But none of that is the point. The point is that you made a judgment about a child you barely know, and you let your daughter carry out that judgment against mine without a word to me. And I needed you to know that I know. Kristen said, I didn't mean it to be hurtful, I said. What did you think would happen when you told your daughter to pull away from her closest friend without any explanation? What did you think that would feel like to the child on the other end of it? She didn't answer. I said, I'm not calling to ask you to force your daughter to continue a friendship. Children's friendships are their own. If Zoe has genuinely moved on, that's something Rosie will adjust to, and I'll help her. But I need you to understand what you did, and I need Zoe to understand it too, because she has learned from you that this is how you handle a friendship you want to end, and she will do this again to someone else if no one tells her what it actually costs. Another silence. Then, quietly, I'll talk to her. I said, thank you. That's all I needed. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a while after. I didn't know if anything would change. I didn't know if Rosie and Zoe would find their way back to each other, or if this was simply the end of something, the way some things end. Not with a fight, not with a reason, just with the slow drift apart that sometimes happens and sometimes can't be stopped. I had made the call I needed to make. The rest was not mine to control. 2 days later, Zoe came up to Rosie at school. I heard about this from Rosie in the car on the way home, her voice careful and measured the way it gets when she's trying to report something accurately rather than emotionally. Zoe had said, I'm sorry I was weird. My mom said she talked to your mom. Rosie had said, do you actually want to be my friend or not? Because if you don't, that's okay, but I need to know. I turned to look at my daughter when she told me this. That was exactly the right thing to say, I told her. She shrugged. I just needed to know. Zoe had said yes. She did want to be friends. She didn't know how to explain the rest of it. She was 8, and the rest of it was beyond her, and I didn't expect her to explain it. She was a child who had been told something by her mother and had done what children do, which is believe it. That wasn't her fault. They ate lunch together the next day. They didn't go back to exactly where they'd been. Things like this leave a mark, and the mark was visible in the way Rosie was a little more careful with her hope, a little more measured with her expectations. That hurt me in its own way. I did not want my daughter to become someone who held back. But I also knew that knowing the difference between safe and unsafe is not the same as holding back, and I hoped that was what she was learning. By December, they were mostly back. Not exactly the same. Nothing is ever exactly the same after it's been bent, but something real. Something that had been tested and had not completely broken. Rosie still wears the friendship bracelets on her left wrist, both sets. The ones from before October and the 3 new ones Zoe made her over winter break. I haven't spoken to Kristen since the phone call. We are back to school friendly, surface, nothing underneath. I don't know what she told Zoe exactly. I don't know whether she understood what I was saying or simply heard it as criticism and filed it away as someone else's problem. I know what she did. I know that she looked at my child and made a decision about her worth. I know that she let her daughter be the instrument of that decision without thinking about what it would cost either of them. I know that Rosie is 8 years old and extraordinary, and that there is no version of this world in which she is the wrong kind of influence. She is the kind of person who moves her backpack. She always has been. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Did I go too far or not far enough? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop your location below. USA, UK, Canada, Australia. I read every single one.